I was scrolling through Facebook at 2 a.m., nursing a glass of wine and avoiding the quarterly reports spread across my coffee table when I saw them. My wedding photos. My dress, my bouquet, my husband Marcus looking at me like I hung the moon. But they weren't on my timeline or in my carefully curated anniversary post. They were attached to a legal document preview in a divorce attorney's sponsored post advertising their services with the tagline, "When your perfect marriage falls apart, we're here to help." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Someone had stolen my wedding photos and was using them to represent their own failed marriage in court documents. My name is Natalie Chen, and I'm about to tell you how discovering this theft led to the most satisfying legal victory of my life. What started as a sleepless night of procrastination turned into a 3-month investigation that exposed a web of fraud, revealed a photography copyright loophole that saved my career, and ended with someone paying more in damages than my entire wedding cost. Let me back up. Marcus and I got married 18 months ago at the Meridian Gardens in Napa Valley. We'd saved for 3 years to afford our dream photographer, Isabella Rodriguez, whose artistic eye and reputation for capturing raw emotion made her worth every penny of her $5,000 fee. Isabella wasn't just any wedding photographer. She was featured in Martha Stewart Weddings twice, had shot celebrities, and more importantly for this story, she was obsessive about her intellectual property rights. The contract we signed was 12 pages long. Most couples probably skimmed it, focused on the delivery timeline and print packages, but I read every word because I work in corporate law. Isabella retained full copyright to all images. We could use them for personal, non-commercial purposes, but any other use required written permission and often additional licensing fees. She watermarked everything, kept detailed records, and had successfully sued 3 companies for unauthorized use of her work. That night, staring at my stolen wedding photos, I screenshot everything. The legal document preview showed a petition for divorce filed by someone named Jennifer Walsh against David Walsh in Alameda County Superior Court. The photos were labeled as Exhibit A, evidence of marital assets and lifestyle, and they were definitely my photos. My grandmother's vintage brooch on my dress, Marcus's custom cufflinks his father made, even the specific lighting setup Isabella had used during our golden hour portraits. But here's where it got interesting. The photos had been digitally altered. Jennifer Walsh's face had been poorly photoshopped over mine, and David Walsh's face replaced Marcus's. They'd even changed the flowers in my bouquet from white peonies to red roses, and altered the background to remove the distinctive Meridian Gardens architecture. Someone had put significant effort into making my wedding photos look like their wedding photos. I immediately called Marcus, who was in Chicago on business. "Honey, you need to sit down. Someone stole our wedding photos and is using them in their divorce case." The line went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "What do you mean stole them? Like they printed them out?" "No, Marcus, they photoshopped their faces onto our bodies and filed them as evidence in court that they had a lavish wedding and lifestyle worth dividing in their divorce settlement." Marcus started laughing, which wasn't the reaction I expected. "Wait, so they're claiming they spent $50,000 on a Napa Valley wedding using our actual $50,000 Napa Valley wedding photos?" "Exactly. And Marcus, there's more. I reverse searched the images. These same photos, with different faces photoshopped on, have been used in at least 6 other divorce cases across 3 different counties. Someone is running a business selling fake wedding photo evidence." That's when it stopped being funny. This wasn't just theft of our personal memories. This was systematic fraud being perpetrated against the family court system, and our wedding photos were the foundation of it all. I hung up with Marcus and immediately called Isabella. It was 3 a.m., but Isabella Rodriguez didn't become successful by keeping normal hours. She answered on the second ring. "Natalie, is everything okay?" I explained what I'd found, sent her the screenshots, and waited while she processed the information. "Those bastards," she finally said. "I've been tracking unauthorized use of my work for 5 years, but I've never seen anything this elaborate. This isn't just copyright infringement, Natalie. This is fraud, perjury, and theft of intellectual property on a commercial scale." Isabella explained that she'd seen isolated cases of people stealing wedding photos for social media clout, but never something this organized. The Photoshop work is actually pretty sophisticated. They'd need professional software and skills to make these alterations court-ready. This isn't some kid stealing photos for Instagram. This is organized crime. We stayed on the phone until sunrise, developing a plan. Isabella would file copyright infringement claims against every instance of theft we could find. I would use my legal connections to alert the courts where these photos had been submitted as evidence. But first, we needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I created spreadsheets tracking every instance of our photos across the internet. I found our images had been used to represent evidence of lavish lifestyle in divorce cases in California, Nevada, and Arizona. The same core set of photos, with different faces photoshopped on, representing different couples seeking different financial outcomes. The most disturbing discovery was a website called Premium Lifestyle Evidence that advertised professional documentation services for family court proceedings. For $1,500, they would provide a complete package of photoshopped wedding photos, fake receipts, and supporting documentation to help clients prove they were entitled to higher alimony or asset division. Our wedding photos were featured prominently in their portfolio. I printed everything, every web page, every court filing, every advertisement. Isabella documented the technical details of the image alterations, proving beyond doubt that her original photos were the source material. We had built an ironclad case, but I wanted to understand who was behind this before we struck. The breakthrough came when I noticed the same Photoshop mistakes across multiple cases. The person doing this work had a distinctive style. They always left a slight color mismatch around the hairline and consistently failed to adjust the skin tone properly. More importantly, they'd made one crucial error. In every single alteration, they'd forgotten to change the reflection in Marcus's watch face, which clearly showed my original face in the crystal. Isabella nearly cried when I pointed this out. That watch reflection is going to destroy them in court. It's unmistakable proof that these are alterations of our original photos. We traced the technical metadata, analyzed the digital fingerprints, and discovered that all the alterations had been created using the same computer with the same software registration, traced back to a graphic design business in Sacramento called Perfect Moments Digital Services. The owner was David Walsh, the same David Walsh who was getting divorced from Jennifer Walsh using our photos as evidence. He'd been photoshopping himself and his wife into other people's wedding photos, then selling the same service to other couples while simultaneously using the photos in his own divorce case. The audacity was breathtaking. Marcus flew home early from Chicago. "So let me get this straight," he said, reviewing my investigation files spread across our dining room table. "This guy is selling fake wedding photos to help people commit perjury in family court, and he's also using our actual wedding photos to try to get money from his own wife in his own divorce case." Marcus started laughing, which wasn't the reaction I expected. Wait, so they're claiming they spent $50,000 on a Napa Valley wedding using our actual $50,000 Napa Valley wedding photos? Exactly. And Marcus, there's more. I reverse searched the images. These same photos, with different faces photoshopped on, have been used in at least 6 other divorce cases across 3 different counties. Someone is running a business selling fake wedding photo evidence. That's when it stopped being funny. This wasn't just theft of our personal memories. This was systematic fraud being perpetrated against the family court system, and our wedding photos were the foundation of it all. I hung up with Marcus and immediately called Isabella. It was 3 a.m., but Isabella Rodriguez didn't become successful by keeping normal hours. She answered on the second ring. "Natalie, is everything okay?" I explained what I'd found, sent her the screenshots, and waited while she processed the information. "Those bastards," she finally said. "I've been tracking unauthorized use of my work for 5 years, but I've never seen anything this elaborate. This isn't just copyright infringement, Natalie. This is fraud, perjury, and theft of intellectual property on a commercial scale." Isabella explained that she'd seen isolated cases of people stealing wedding photos for social media clout, but never something this organized. The Photoshop work is actually pretty sophisticated. They'd need professional software and skills to make these alterations court-ready. This isn't some kid stealing photos for Instagram. This is organized crime. We stayed on the phone until sunrise, developing a plan. Isabella would file copyright infringement claims against every instance of theft we could find. I would use my legal connections to alert the courts where these photos had been submitted as evidence. But first, we needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I created spreadsheets tracking every instance of our photos across the internet. I found our images had been used to represent evidence of lavish lifestyle in divorce cases in California, Nevada, and Arizona. The same core set of photos, with different faces photoshopped on, representing different couples seeking different financial outcomes. The most disturbing discovery was a website called Premium Lifestyle Evidence that advertised professional documentation services for family court proceedings. For $1,500, they would provide a complete package of photoshopped wedding photos, fake receipts, and supporting documentation to help clients prove they were entitled to higher alimony or asset division. Our wedding photos were featured prominently in their portfolio. And he's been doing it for at least 2 years, probably making 6 figures annually from this fraud scheme. We had everything we needed to destroy David Walsh's operation and get justice for the theft of our most precious memories. Isabella had documented copyright infringement worth hundreds of thousands in damages. I had evidence of systematic fraud being perpetrated against multiple court systems. And we had the smoking gun, Marcus's watch reflection that would prove every single altered photo was stolen from our original wedding pictures. But before we made our move, I wanted to understand just how deep this rabbit hole went. Because if David Walsh had stolen our photos and was this brazen about it, I had a feeling we were looking at something much bigger than just one fraudulent divorce case. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Marcus canceled his entire week of client meetings. We were going to war, and we needed to be strategic about it. Isabella arrived at our house by 9 a.m. with 2 large coffee drinks and a briefcase full of legal documents. "I've been thinking about this all night," she said, spreading papers across our kitchen island. "We don't just want to stop David Walsh, we want to destroy his entire operation and make sure he never does this to another couple." I'd spent hours researching David Walsh's business. Perfect Moments Digital Services had been operating for 3 years, registered as a legitimate graphic design company specializing in photo restoration and enhancement services. Their website was professionally designed, complete with testimonials from satisfied customers who praised their ability to help families preserve precious memories and provide documentation services for important life events. It was all carefully worded to avoid explicitly advertising fraud, but the subtext was clear to anyone looking for these specific services. What made me furious was how they marketed to people going through divorces. The testimonials included quotes like, "Perfect Moments helped me prove my lifestyle during my marriage," and "Their documentation services saved my financial future." They weren't just stealing our photos. They were preying on people desperate to secure their financial stability during the most vulnerable time of their lives. Marcus had his laptop open, cross-referencing court records with the photos we'd identified. "Natalie, I found something interesting. In every case where our photos were used, the requesting party got significantly higher settlements than average for their county. Jennifer Walsh was awarded 60% of marital assets, claiming her lifestyle required substantial support to maintain. Another woman in Fresno got $45,000 in monthly alimony for 3 years. Isabella looked up from her paperwork. So these fake photos actually work? Judges are making financial decisions based on stolen wedding photos? I nodded grimly. Family court judges see hundreds of cases. They don't have time to forensically analyze every photo submitted as evidence. If the documentation looks professional and supports the financial claims being made, they accept it. David Walsh has figured out how to game the system. The scope of the fraud was staggering. We'd identified 12 divorce cases across 4 states where our photos appeared. Conservative estimates suggested David Walsh had helped his clients fraudulently obtain over $2 million in additional settlements and alimony payments. But we needed more than just evidence of past crimes. We needed to catch him actively committing fraud, preferably with witnesses and documentation that would hold up in both civil and criminal court. Isabella had an idea. What if we hire him, set up a consultation as potential clients, and record everything? Marcus immediately started shaking his head. That's entrapment. It could compromise the entire case if we're caught lying about our intentions. I thought about it differently. Actually, it's not entrapment if we're documenting a crime in progress. We wouldn't be inducing him to commit fraud. We'd be observing him offer services he's already providing. But we need to be careful about how we approach it. Isabella smiled. I have a better idea. What if I approach him as a photographer whose clients are asking for lifestyle documentation services? I could claim I want to refer business to him, but need to understand his process first. We spent the afternoon crafting Isabella's cover story. She would present herself as a wedding photographer whose wealthy clients sometimes needed additional documentation for legal proceedings. She'd claim she couldn't provide these services herself due to professional ethics, but she'd heard perfect moments could help. It was plausible enough to get David Walsh talking without requiring us to pose as actual divorce clients. While Isabella prepared for her undercover meeting, I focused on the legal strategy. I contacted my firm's intellectual property specialist, Sarah Kim, who nearly choked on her coffee when I explained the situation. Natalie, this is the most clear-cut copyright infringement case I've seen in 15 years. Isabella's contract language is bulletproof, her documentation is meticulous, and the commercial use is undeniable. We could sue for actual damages, lost profits, and statutory damages up to $150,000 per infringement. Sarah helped me understand the full scope of our legal options. Beyond copyright infringement, we could pursue civil fraud claims against David Walsh and potential referrals for perjury and wire fraud. The fact that he's using these photos in court filings makes this a federal crime, Sarah explained. Fraud committed against the court system carries serious penalties, especially when it's systematic and ongoing. But Sarah warned me about one crucial factor. If David Walsh declares bankruptcy or doesn't have significant assets, you might win judgments you can never collect. We need to understand his financial situation before we strike. That evening, Marcus and I dove deep into David Walsh's business records. California requires businesses to file annual statements, and Perfect Moments Digital Services had been surprisingly profitable. Their gross revenue for the previous year was over $400,000, with most of that income coming from their documentation services division. David Walsh owned his home outright, valued at $600,000. He had business assets, including professional photography equipment and computers. Most importantly, he carried professional liability insurance that might cover copyright infringement claims. We weren't just fighting for justice. We were fighting someone who actually had the assets to pay significant damages. Isabella's meeting with David Walsh was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at his studio. We equipped her with a hidden recording device, legally permissible in California as long as one party to the conversation consents to recording. I coached her on questions that would elicit incriminating responses without seeming suspicious. The goal was to get David Walsh to explicitly describe his process for creating fake wedding photos and explain how clients used these images in legal proceedings. Meanwhile, I reached out to the divorce attorneys who had been unknowingly complicit in David Walsh's fraud scheme. Most were horrified when I explained that their clients had submitted falsified evidence. Attorney Jennifer Park, who had represented 3 different clients using our stolen photos, was particularly helpful. I always wondered why these particular clients had such elaborate wedding photos but seemed to struggle with basic legal fees, she told me. Now it makes sense. They were paying David Walsh instead of investing in proper legal representation. Jennifer agreed to review her case files and document every instance where Perfect Moments documentation had been submitted as evidence. She also provided insights into how family court judges evaluated lifestyle evidence, which would help us understand the full impact of David Walsh's fraud on the judicial system. The night before Isabella's meeting, we rehearsed every possible scenario. What if David Walsh asked for references from her supposed clients? Isabella had prepared vague responses about client confidentiality.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
What if he wanted to see examples of her photography work? She'd prepared a portfolio of legitimate wedding photos from her archives. What if he became suspicious and refused to discuss his services? She had backup questions about general photo editing that might still elicit useful information. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since taking the bar exam. This wasn't just about recovering damages for stolen photos anymore. We were potentially exposing a criminal enterprise that had defrauded courts and harmed innocent ex-spouses who had been required to pay inflated settlements based on falsified evidence. The weight of responsibility felt enormous. Marcus tried to lighten the mood by joking about the irony. A year and a half ago, we were worried about whether our wedding photos would turn out well enough for our anniversary cards. Now we're using them to take down a criminal operation. But even he was tense. We'd invested weeks into this investigation, and tomorrow would determine whether we had enough evidence to move forward or if David Walsh would slip through our fingers. Isabella texted me at midnight. "I've been thinking about all the couples whose real wedding photos he's stolen. How many people like us don't even know their memories are being used to help strangers commit fraud? Tomorrow isn't just about getting justice for us. It's about protecting every photographer and every couple whose intimate moments have been commodified by this predator." She was right. David Walsh hadn't just stolen our photos. He'd violated the trust between photographers and clients, corrupted the family court system, and turned other people's most precious memories into tools for deception. Tomorrow, we would begin the process of holding him accountable for all of it. Isabella walked into Perfect Moments Digital Services at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of confident smile that had convinced countless brides to trust her with their most important day. David Walsh greeted her in the reception area, a thin man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair and the eager demeanor of someone desperate to close a deal. "Miss Rodriguez, thank you so much for coming. I understand you have some clients who might benefit from our specialized documentation services." From my car across the street, I watched through binoculars as they disappeared into his office. Marcus sat beside me with a laptop, monitoring the audio feed from Isabella's hidden recorder. The sound quality was crystal clear. We could hear David Walsh offering coffee, making small talk about the photography business, and gradually steering the conversation toward his real services. "So, tell me about these clients of yours," David Walsh said. "What kind of documentation are they looking for?" Isabella played her role perfectly. "Well, they're going through some difficult personal situations. Divorces, custody disputes. They need to demonstrate their lifestyle and financial circumstances to the court. But some of them are worried their actual wedding photos don't adequately reflect their true circumstances during the marriage." There was a pause, and I could almost hear David Walsh calculating whether Isabella was a potential client or a threat. "I see. And these clients, they're looking for what exactly? Enhanced versions of their existing photos?" Isabella had prepared for this moment. "Actually, some of them are in situations where their original wedding documentation isn't available or doesn't properly represent their lifestyle. They need comprehensive photo packages that accurately reflect their circumstances." David Walsh's voice became more animated. "Oh, we specialize in exactly that kind of work. Comprehensive lifestyle documentation for legal proceedings. We can create entire wedding photo collections that demonstrate the appropriate level of affluence and celebration. Our work is indistinguishable from original photography, and we guarantee court admissibility." Marcus grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. David Walsh was explicitly describing his fraud services to someone he believed was a potential business partner. Isabella pressed further. "How do you ensure the photos look authentic? Courts are getting more sophisticated about detecting digital manipulation." David Walsh laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "That's our secret sauce. We start with authentic base images from real luxury weddings. Then we customize them for each client's specific needs. The lighting, the venue details, the emotional expressions, they're all genuine because they're captured from real events. We just make the necessary adjustments to reflect our clients' actual circumstances." Isabella asked the question we'd been waiting for. "Where do you source these base images? Do you have partnerships with photographers or venues?" David Walsh's answer confirmed everything we suspected. "We have an extensive collection of high-end wedding photography that we've acquired over the years. Professional quality images from top-tier photographers, luxury venues, expensive celebrations, the kind of documentation that really impresses family court judges." He was admitting to stealing professional wedding photography and using it to create fraudulent evidence for court proceedings. But Isabella wasn't finished. "Can you walk me through an example of how this works? Maybe show me a before and after so I can explain the process to my clients?" David Walsh was more than happy to demonstrate his criminal enterprise. We heard him moving around the office, opening files on his computer. Here's a perfect example. This is one of our most popular base images from a wedding photographer named Isabella Rodriguez. Beautiful work, very expensive looking. We've used this particular photo set in dozens of cases across multiple states. My heart stopped. He was showing Isabella her own stolen photographs, not knowing who she was. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. Isabella's voice remained steady as she responded. Wow, these are gorgeous photos. The lighting is incredible. How do you modify them for different clients? David Walsh launched into a detailed explanation of his Photoshop process, describing how he replaced faces, altered backgrounds, changed floral arrangements, and adjusted clothing details to match each client's story. The key is maintaining the emotional authenticity of the original photos while customizing the visual details. Family court judges respond to the feeling of genuine love and celebration, so we preserve that while adapting everything else. He pulled up our original wedding photos on his computer and began showing Isabella multiple variations he'd created. See this couple here? This is the original. We've turned this into weddings for 12 different clients. Different faces, different flowers, different reception details, but the same underlying emotional impact. Judges see these photos and immediately understand that this couple invested significantly in their wedding celebration. Isabella asked about pricing and turnaround times. David Walsh explained that his basic package cost $1,500 and included 20 customized photos, fake receipts from luxury vendors, and a written narrative describing the wedding celebration. His premium package, at $3,000, included 50 photos, video clips, and detailed financial documentation showing wedding expenses totaling between $50,000 and $100,000. Our success rate in family court is remarkable, David Walsh boasted. Clients who use our documentation services average settlements 30 to 40% higher than clients who rely on their actual wedding photos or documentation. We're not just providing photos, we're providing financial security for people going through the worst time of their lives. Isabella had heard enough. She thanked David Walsh for his time, promised to refer clients to him, and arranged to follow up the following week. As she left his office, I could see the fury in her posture, even from across the street. The moment she got in her car, she called us. "Drive to the police station right now. We're filing criminal charges today." At the Sacramento Police Department, Detective Maria Santos listened to our entire recording with growing amazement. In 20 years of investigating fraud cases, I've never seen anything this systematic or brazen. This guy just confessed to multiple felonies while trying to recruit an accomplice. She explained that David Walsh's crimes included copyright infringement, wire fraud, perjury by proxy, and conspiracy to defraud the court system. Detective Santos immediately obtained search warrants for David Walsh's business and personal computers. The forensic analysis revealed the full scope of his operation. His computers contained over 50,000 stolen wedding photos from hundreds of different photographers. He'd created fake wedding documentation for more than 300 clients over 3 years, generating over $1 million in revenue from his fraudulent services. The evidence was overwhelming. Every photo edit was meticulously documented in his files, complete with client names, case numbers, and the specific court proceedings where the photos had been submitted. David Walsh had kept detailed records of his own criminal enterprise, apparently believing his services were legally protected as creative editing rather than fraud. Within 48 hours, David Walsh was arrested at his studio. The local news picked up the story immediately. Sacramento man arrested for massive wedding photo fraud scheme became the top story on every Bay Area news station. Reporters interviewed family court judges who expressed shock at the sophistication of the fraud and concern about how many cases might have been decided based on falsified evidence. Isabella's phone started ringing constantly as other photographers realized their work had been stolen. The Professional Photographers Association issued a statement condemning David Walsh's crimes and establishing a legal defense fund to help photographers pursue copyright claims. Our case became the foundation for a class action lawsuit that eventually included over 200 photographers whose work had been stolen. The civil litigation moved quickly because the evidence was so clear. David Walsh's attorney tried to argue that photo editing was a legitimate service and that his clients were responsible for how they used the images. But the recordings from Isabella's meeting destroyed any possibility of claiming ignorance about the fraudulent purpose of his work. The court awarded Isabella $300,000 in copyright damages, the maximum allowed under federal law. Marcus and I received additional compensation for emotional distress and the violation of our privacy. But the real victory was the criminal conviction. David Walsh pled guilty to 15 felony counts and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, plus restitution to victims. The family courts where our photos had been used as evidence reopened dozens of cases for review. Several divorce settlements were overturned, and ex-spouses who had been forced to pay inflated alimony based on falsified evidence were able to recover hundreds of thousands of dollars. The scandal led to new protocols for validating photographic evidence in family court proceedings. 6 months after David Walsh's arrest, Isabella and I were featured on a news program about copyright protection for creative professionals. The interviewer asked what we'd learned from the experience. "We learned that our most precious memories have value beyond sentiment," Isabella said. "When someone steals and commercializes intimate moments from your life, they're not just violating copyright law, they're attacking the trust that makes meaningful relationships possible." I added my own perspective. "We also learned that fighting back against exploitation isn't just about getting justice for yourself. Every time we allow someone to profit from victimizing others, we're enabling them to hurt more people. Sometimes the most personal fight is also the most important one for your community." The experience changed how Isabella structures her photography contracts. She now includes specific language about criminal penalties for unauthorized use and maintains a digital fingerprinting system that makes it easier to detect stolen images online. She's helped dozens of other photographers recover damages from copyright thieves. Marcus and I kept one of the altered photos as a reminder of what we'd accomplished. It shows our faces, poorly photoshopped onto someone else's bodies, standing in front of a generic wedding backdrop with fake flowers and artificial smiles. Next to it, we display our original wedding photos, the ones David Walsh tried to steal and commodify. The contrast tells our whole story: real love, real commitment, and real justice triumphing over fake documentation, fraudulent schemes, and criminal exploitation. Our wedding photos were never just pictures. They were proof of something authentic in a world full of people trying to counterfeit happiness. David Walsh learned that authenticity has legal protection, and sometimes the copyright belongs to the people who refuse to let their truth be stolen. 2 years later, Marcus and I received an unexpected letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. David Walsh's case had led to a nationwide investigation into wedding photo fraud that uncovered similar operations in 12 states. Our stolen images had become evidence in what the FBI called Operation False Memory, the largest copyright fraud investigation in recent history. The letter thanked us for our cooperation and informed us that our case had helped recover over $8 million for victims of similar schemes. Apparently, David Walsh hadn't been working alone. He was part of a network that specialized in creating fraudulent lifestyle evidence for high-stakes divorce cases, and our investigation had provided the breakthrough federal agents needed to dismantle the entire operation. Isabella framed the FBI letter and hung it in her studio next to her business license and professional certifications. "Every time a potential client asks about copyright protection, I show them this," she told me during our monthly coffee catch-up. "It's the best advertising I've ever had for taking intellectual property seriously." The ripple effects of our case extended far beyond what we'd imagined. The Professional Photographers Association now requires copyright education as part of their certification program. Family courts across the country implemented new authentication procedures for photographic evidence. Several states passed legislation making the commercial use of stolen wedding photos a specific criminal offense with enhanced penalties. But the most satisfying outcome was personal. Last month, we received a handwritten note from Jennifer Walsh, David's ex-wife. She'd discovered that her divorce settlement was based entirely on fraudulent evidence, including our stolen wedding photos. The court had overturned their original agreement, and she was no longer required to pay alimony based on a lifestyle that never existed. "I wanted to thank you for your courage in exposing this fraud," she wrote. "I was manipulated by my ex-husband just as much as you were. Your investigation gave me my financial freedom back and helped me understand that I wasn't crazy for questioning why our luxury wedding photos never matched my memories of our actual courthouse ceremony. Marcus jokes that our wedding photos are now more famous than we are, but I prefer to think of them as educational tools. Every time someone shares our story, another photographer learns to protect their work, another family court judge learns to verify evidence more carefully, and another couple understands that their memories have real value worth defending. Our anniversary this year was different from the previous ones. Instead of just celebrating our marriage, we celebrated our partnership in creating something meaningful from violation and theft. We turned our stolen wedding photos into a shield protecting other couples from the same exploitation we'd experienced. The settlement money helped us buy our first house, but the real reward was the criminal conviction. David Walsh pled guilty to 15 felony counts and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison plus restitution to victims. The family courts where our photos had been used as evidence reopened dozens of cases for review. Several divorce settlements were overturned, and ex-spouses who had been forced to pay inflated alimony based on falsified evidence were able to recover hundreds of thousands of dollars. The scandal led to new protocols for validating photographic evidence in family court proceedings. 6 months after David Walsh's arrest, Isabella and I were featured on a news program about copyright protection for creative professionals. The interviewer asked what we'd learned from the experience. "We learned that our most precious memories have value beyond sentiment," Isabella said. "When someone steals and commercializes intimate moments from your life, they're not just violating copyright law. They're attacking the trust that makes meaningful relationships possible." I added my own perspective. We also learned that fighting back against exploitation isn't just about getting justice for yourself. Every time we allow someone to profit from victimizing others, we're enabling them to hurt more people. Sometimes the most personal fight is also the most important one for your community. The experience changed how Isabella structures her photography contracts. She now includes specific language about criminal penalties for unauthorized use and maintains a digital fingerprinting system that makes it easier to detect stolen images online. She's helped dozens of other photographers recover damages from copyright thieves. Marcus and I kept one of the altered photos as a reminder of what we'd accomplished. It shows our faces poorly photoshopped onto someone else's bodies, standing in front of a generic wedding backdrop with fake flowers and artificial smiles. Next to it, we display our original wedding photos, the ones David Walsh tried to steal and commodify. The contrast tells our whole story. Real love,